Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I am back with some more Esoterica. Today we are diving back into the works of Mr. Manly Hall. We are talking about the secret teachings of all ages. We are reading and discussing as we go along the various topics that are brought to light by the text itself. We are up to Freemasonic symbolism, so we're going to go ahead and say, I am not a Freemason, have no desire to be a Freemason. I don't like the secret clubs, but I do not think that they are responsible for all of the evils in the world. If any of that upsets you, you're probably not going to like the rest of what is coming. If you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there are several playlists linked in the corner up here and in the box down below, along with the source material, so that you can go back and get a better understanding of who I am and where I am coming from. With all of that being said, we are going to dive into and talk about Freemasonic symbolism. Let's go. In several early Masonic manuscripts, for example, the Harleian, Sloane, Lansdowne, and Edinburgh Kenwilling, it is stated that the craft of initiated builders existed before the deluge, and that its members were employed in the building of the Tower of Babel. A Masonic constitution, dated 1701, gives the following naive account of the origin of the sciences, arts, and crafts from which the major part of Masonic symbolism is derived. How was this worthy science the first begun? I shall tell. Before Noah's flood there was a man called Lamech, as it is written in 4 chapter of Genesis, and this Lamech had 2 wives. One was called Adah, and the other Zillah. By the first wife, Adah, he got 2 sons, the one called Jabal, and the other Jubal. And by the other wife, Zillah, he got a son and daughter, and the 4 children found the beginning of all crafts in the world. This Jabal was the elder son, and he found the craft of geometric, and he parted flocks, as of sheep and lambs in the field, and first wrought houses of stone and tree, as it is noted in the chapter aforesaid. And his brother, Jubal, found the craft of music, of songs, organs, and harp. The third brother, Tubal-Cain, found out smith's craft to work iron and steel. And their sister, Naamah, found out the art of weaving. These children did not know that God would take vengeance for sin, either by fire or water, wherefore they wrote these sciences, which they had found in 2 pillars of stone, that they might be found after the flood. The one stone was called Marbel, cannot burn with fire, and the other was called Laturus, brass, that cannot drown in the water. The author of this constitution thereupon declares that one of these pillars was later discovered by Hermes, who communicated to mankind the secrets thereon inscribed. That is a perfect example of self-insertion, right? We talk about that all of the time, how retroactively you look back through history and you decide, hey, that fits almost the story that I already know, so let me go ahead and make it talk about exactly the story I know. This almost certainly is not true. It is almost certainly not even recorded anywhere in this manner, right? I have not run across it, and I have spent a considerable amount of time on the Old Testament. And so, yes, this is an excellent example of self-insertion. In his Antiquities of the Jews, Josephus writes that Adam had forewarned his descendants that sinful humanity would be destroyed by a deluge. That is not true either. In order to preserve their science and philosophy, the children of Seth were therefore raised 2 pillars, one of brick and the other of stone, on which were inscribed the keys to their knowledge. Now, when I say that that's not true, that is not according to the Old Testament. According to the Old Testament, what happened when Noah was told was revelatory, right? That doesn't mean that that is exactly honest. Now, if you look back, as we have done, go back through the works of Plato, and you can see Timaeus and Critias, and they talk about the cyclic nature of destruction that happens to this planet once every 6,000 years. You have either a flood or a fire. It is repeating every 12,000 years. So every 12,000 years there is a fire, and then 6,000 years there's a flood. And then there's a fire 6,000 years after that, and there's 6,000 years after that there's a flood. The last one was a flood, the next one will be a fire. We are coming upon that if antiquity is true. But it was not recorded in the Bible that Adam said that there would be a deluge. The patriarch Enoch, whose name means the initiator, is evidently a personification of the sun, since he lived 365 years. He also constructed an underground temple consisting of 9 vaults, one beneath the other, placing the deepest vault a triangular tablet of gold, bearing upon it the absolute and ineffable name of deity. I don't know where that account came from either. Like, if you have the source material for that, let me know. I didn't transfer that back to y'all, but if you have the source material for that, let me know, right? Now, there is recorded that he lived 365 years where he was taken off of the earth alive, but this 9 vaults and underground temple and triangular tablet of gold, I do not recall that being in the Bible at all. I don't even recall seeing that in the book of Enoch, which we also read through. And so, yeah. According to some accounts, Enoch made 2 golden deltas. The larger he placed upon the white cubical altar in the lowest vault, and the smaller he gave into the keeping of his son, Methuselah, who did the actual construction work of the brick chambers according to the pattern revealed by his father to his father by the Most High. In the form and arrangement of these vaults, Enoch epitomized the 9 spheres of the ancient mysteries and the 9 sacred strata of the earth through which the initiate must pass to reach the flaming spirit dwelling in its central core. Now, I'm going to go ahead, pause right here, and let you know. I have another video. The Fundamental Harmonics of Life, I believe, is the video in which this in particular is recorded, and it is not 9, it is 7, with 8 being the beginning of the new. There are 7 divisions of the terrestrial earth, which is below us, with the 9th being the layer of water. Then we have 9 layers of atmosphere, beginning with water, and then, or 8, right? 7 with 8 being space. So there are 7 layers of the earth, with the 8th being the water. There are 7 layers of the atmosphere, beginning with the water, and the 8th being space, which is the beginning of the new harmonic. So it's not 9, it's 8. That's the number. According to Freemasonic symbolism, Enoch, fearing that all knowledge of the sacred mysteries would be lost at the time of the deluge, erected the 2 columns mentioned in the quotation. And again, according to the Bible, this did not happen. According to the Bible, we get like 3 lines about Enoch. That's it. So this is a little bit wild. Even in the book of Enoch, this is not recorded. The columns, the first time I recall seeing the columns being implicitly talked about was in the Temple of Solomon. So upon the metal column, in appropriate allegorical symbols, he engraved the secret teaching, and upon the marble column placed an inscription stating that a short distance away a priceless treasure would be discovered in a subterranean vault. After having thus faithfully completed his labors, Enoch was translated from the brow of Mount Moriah. In time, the location of the secret vaults was lost, but after the lapse of ages there came another builder, an initiate after the order of Enoch, and he, while laying the foundations for another temple to the great architect of the universe, discovered the long-lost vaults and the secrets contained within. John Leland was appointed by King Henry VIII to go through the archives of the various religious institutions dissolved by the king and remove for preservation any books or manuscripts of an important character. Among the documents copied by Leland was a series of questions and answers concerning the mystery of Masonry written by King Henry VI. In answer to the question, "How came Masonry into England?" the document states that Peter Gower, a Grecian, traveled for knowledge in Egypt, Syria, and every land where the Phoenicians had planted Masonry. Winning entrance in all lodges of Masons, he learned much, and, returning, dwelt in the greater Greece. He became renowned for his wisdom, formed a great lodge at Groton, and made many Masons, some of whom journeyed in France, spreading Masonry there. From France, in the course of time, the order passed into England. To even the superficial student of this subject, it must be evident that the name Peter Gower, the Grecian, is merely an angelicalized form of Pythagoras. Consequently, Groton, where he formed his lodge, is easily identified with Crotona. A link is thus established between philosophic mysteries of Greece and medieval Freemasonry. I have a saying. I say this all of the time. If you're looking for something, you're going to find it. It doesn't matter what you're looking for. If you're looking for it, you're going to find it. If you buy a new car, right? You've never seen anybody driving that car around, but you go out and you buy a new car, you're going to see that car everywhere. If you are a person who lives in search of racism, you believe that everything is brought down to the level of melanin, you're going to find racism everywhere. If you look for sexism, you are going to find it absolutely everywhere. You can blame absolutely anything upon these things, but it doesn't mean that they're actually there. Peter Gower, the Grecian, being an anglicized form of Pythagoras, is a stretch. You can make it work. You can. Peter Gower, Pythagoras. That's not even close enough to be semantically the same, but go ahead, do your thing. Doesn't mean it's true. Doesn't mean it's real. Does not mean that it is authentic. Just bear that in mind. In his notes on King Henry's questions and answers, William Preston enlarges upon the vow of secrecy as it was practiced by the ancient initiates. On the order of Pliny, he describes how Anarchus, having been imprisoned in the order to extort from him some of the secrets with which he had been entrusted, bit out his own tongue and threw it in the face of Nicocreon, the tyrant of Cyprus. Preston adds that the Athenians revered a brazen statue that was represented without a tongue to denote the sanctity with which they regarded their oath-bound secrets. It is also noteworthy that, according to King Henry's manuscript, Masonry had its origin in the East and was a carrier of the arts and sciences of civilization to the primitive humanity of the Western nations. Conspicuous among the symbols of Freemasonry are the 7 liberal arts and sciences. By grammar, man is taught to express in noble and adequate language his innermost thoughts and ideals. By rhetoric, he is enabled to conceal his ideas under the protecting cover of ambiguous language and figures of speech. By logic, he is trained in the organization of the intellectual faculties with which he has been endowed. By arithmetic, he not only is instructed in the mystery of the universe, but also gains keys to the multitude, magnitude, and proportion. By geometry, he is inducted into the mathematics of form, the harmony and rhythm of angles, and the philosophy of organization. By music, he is reminded that the universe is founded upon the laws of celestial harmonics, and that harmony and rhythm are all-pervading. I will point once again to the fundamental harmonics of life. By astronomy, he gains an understanding of the immensities of time and space, and the proper relationship between himself and the universe, and of the awesomeness of that unknown power which is driving the countless stars of the firmament through illimitable space. Equipped with the knowledge and conferred by familiarity with the liberal arts and sciences, the studious Freemason, therefore, finds himself confronted by a few problems with which he cannot cope. All right, we're going to drop back and look at the mystery of the macrocosm redrawn from Cesarenio's edition of Vitruvius. Human corpus men servant. I don't know all of this, but some of it you can make out. There's geometry, schematica, invente. And so this is used in sacred geometry to map out humanity, which is absolutely a thing. There is absolutely proportionality. There is absolutely things to be taken from sacred geometry. I am not entirely sure that the Freemasons have the actual keys involved in that, but summarizing the relationship between the human body and the theory of architectonics, Vitruvius writes, since nature has designed the human body so that its members are duly proportioned to the frame as a whole, it appears that the ancients had good reason for their rule, that in perfect building the different members must be in exact, symmetrical relations to the whole general scheme. Hence, While transmitting to us the proper arrangements for buildings of all kinds, they were particularly careful to do so in the cases of temples of the gods, buildings in which merits and faults usually last forever. Therefore, if it is agreed that the number was found out from the human fingers, and that there is a symmetrical correspondence between the members separately and the entire form of the body, in accordance with a certain part selected as a standard, we have nothing but respect for those who, in constructing temples of the immortal gods, have so arranged the members of the works that both the separate parts and the whole design may harmonize in their proportions and symmetry. That would be based upon the golden mean, which is the proportion between the digits in your fingers, the proportion between the digits in your fingers and with your palm and with your forearm and with your entire arm and through the body as a whole. There is the golden mean, which is exactly defining that. By some, it is believed that St. Paul was initiated into the Dionysiac mysteries, for in the 10th verse of the 3rd chapter of 1 Corinthians, he calls himself a master builder, or adept, according to the grace of God, which is given unto me as a wise master builder. I have laid the foundation and another building thereon. As survivals of the ancient Dionysiac rites, the 2 diagrams of Caesariano accompanying this chapter are incalculable value to the modern mystic architect. I'm going to take this and I'm going to see if I can't get somebody upset, because this right here, if you are unaware, Paul does not have a whole lot to do with Christianity in its original intentions. He did self-insert himself. He did indeed create a lot of doctrines. He built a whole brand new foundation upon which to build things. And it has absolutely nothing to do with what the other 12 disciples were running around talking about. The people who actually studied at the feet of Jesus had an entirely different story to tell than the one that Paul did. And yeah, you should definitely look into that. I know, I probably got somebody mad, but if that one got you mad, check out the Unconventional Bible Study. It will set you straight. The Dionysiac Architects. The most celebrated of the ancient fraternities of artisans was that of the Dionysiac Architects. This organization was composed exclusively of initiates of the Bacchus Dionysus cult, and was peculiarly consecrated to the science of building and the art of decoration. Acclaimed as being the custodians of a secret and sacred knowledge of architectonics, its members were entrusted with the design and erection of public buildings and monuments. The superlative excellence of their handiwork elevated its members to the guild of a position of surpassing dignity. They were regarded as the master craftsmen of the earth. Because of the first dances held in honor of Dionysus, he was considered the founder and patron of the theater. And the Dionysians specialized in the construction of buildings adapted for the presentation of dramatic performances. In the circular or semicircular orchestra, they invariably erected an altar to Aeschylus, the famous Greek poet, that while appearing in one of his own plays, he was suspected by a mob of angry spectators of revealing one of the profound secrets of the mysteries, and was forced to seek refuge at the altar of Dionysus. So carefully did the Dionysiac architects safeguard their secrets of the craft that only fragmentary records exist of their esoteric teachings. John A. Weissy thus sums up the meager data available concerning the order. They made their appearance, certainly not later than 1000 BC, and appear to have enjoyed particular privileges and immunities. They also possessed secret means of recognition and were bound together by special ties, only known to themselves. The richer of this fraternity were bound to provide for their poorer brethren. They were divided into communities, governed by a master and wardens, and called connected houses. They held a ground festival annually and were held in high esteem. Their ceremonials were regarded as sacred. It has been claimed that Solomon, at the insistence of Hiram, king of Tyre, employed them at his temple and palaces. They were also employed at the construction of the temple of Diana at Ephesus. They had means of intercommunication all over the then known world, and from them, doubtless, sprang the guilds of the traveling masons known in the Middle Ages. See the obelisk and Freemasonry. The fraternity of the Dionysiac architects spread throughout all of Asia Minor, even reaching Egypt and India. They established themselves in nearly all of the countries bordering on the Mediterranean, and with the rise of the Roman Empire found their way into Central Europe and even into England. The most stately and enduring buildings in Constantinople, Rhodes, Athens, and Rome were erected by these inspired craftsmen. One of the most illustrious of their number was Vitruvius, the great architect, renowned as the author of De Architectura Libri Decim. In the various sections of this book, Vitruvius gives several hints as to the philosophy underlying the Dionysiac concept of the principle of symmetry applied to the science of architecture, as derived from a consideration of the proportions established by nature between the parts and members of the human body. The following extract from Vitruvius on the subject of symmetry is representative. The design of a temple depends on symmetry, the principles of which must be carefully observed by the architect. They are due to proportion of a correspondence according to among the measures of the members of the entire work, and of the whole to a certain part selected as standard. From this result the principles of symmetry. Without symmetry and proportion, there can be no principles in the design of any temple. That is, if there is no precise relation between its members, as in the case of those of a well-shaped man, for the human body is so designed by nature that the face, from the chin to the top of the forehead and the lowest roots of the hair, is a tenth part of the whole height. The open hand, from the wrist to the tip of the middle finger, is the same. The head, from the chin to the crown, is an eighth, and with the neck and shoulder, from the top of the breast to the lower roots of the hair, is a sixth. From the middle of the breast to the summit of the crown is a fourth. If we take the height of the face itself, the distance from the bottom of the chin to the underside of the nostrils, and from that point to a line between the eyebrows, is the same. From there to the lowest roots of the hair is also a third, comprising the forehead. The length of the foot is 1/6 of the height of the body, of the forearm 1/4, and the breadth of the breast is also 1/4. The other members, too, have their own symmetrical proportions, and it was by employing them that the famous painters and sculptors of antiquity attained to great and endless renown. The edifices raised by the Dionysiac builders were indeed sermons in stone. Though unable to comprehend fully the cosmic principles thus embodied in these masterpieces of human ingenuity and industry, even the uninitiated were invariably overwhelmed by the sense of majesty and symmetry resulting from the perfect coordination of pillars, spans, arches, and domes. By variations in the details of size, material, type, arrangement, ornamentation, and color, these inspired builders believed it possible to provoke in the nature of the onlooker certain distinct mental or emotional reactions. Vitruvius, for example, describes the disposition of bronze vases about a room so as to produce certain definite changes in the tone and quality of the human voice. In like manner, each chamber in the mysteries through which the candidate passed had its own peculiar acoustics. Thus, in one chamber, the voice of the priest was amplified until his words caused the very room to vibrate, while in another the voice was diminished and softened to such a degree that it sounded like the distant tinkling of silver bells. Again, in some of the underground passageways, the candidate was apparently bereft of the power of speech, for though he shouted at the top of his voice, not even a whisper was audible to his ears. After progressing a few feet, however, he would discover that his softest sigh would be re-echoed 100 times. The supreme ambition of the Dionysiac architects was the construction of buildings which would create distinct impressions consistent with the purpose for which the structure itself was designed. In common with the Pythagoreans, they believed it possible by combinations of straight lines and curves to induce any desired mental attitude or emotion. They labored, therefore, to the end of producing a building perfectly harmonious with the structure of the universe itself. They may have even believed that an edifice so constructed, because it was in no respect at variance with any existing reality, would not be subject to dissolution, but would endure throughout the span of mortal time. As a logical deduction from their philosophic trend of thought, such a building, en rapport with cosmos, would have become an oracle. Certain early works on magical philosophy hint that the Ark of the Covenant was an oracular in character because of specially prepared chambers in its interior. These, by their shape and arrangement, were so attuned with the vibrations of the invisible world that they caught and amplified the voices of the ages, imprinted upon and eternally existent in the substance of astral light. I hold a slightly different view on that, and if you would like to know more, you can go back to Exodus and check it out. But I do believe that it was for capturing the vibrations. It was for capturing static electricity. It served as a battery and a capacitor, as well as a discharge device through the shamir. You can definitely go back and check that out as part of the Bible study. Unskilled in these ancient subtleties of their profession, modern architects often create architectural absurdities which would cause their creators to blush with shame did they comprehend their actual symbolic import. Thus, phallic emblems are strewn in profusion among the adornments of banks, office buildings, and department stores. Christian churches also may be surmounted with Brahmin or Mohammedan domes, or be designed in a style suitable for a Jewish synagogue or a Greek temple to Pluto. These incongruities may be considered trivial in importance by the modern designer, but to the trained psychologist, the purpose for which a building was erected is frustrated in large measure by the presence of such architectural discordances. Vitruvius thus defines the principle of propriety as conceived and applied by the Dionysians. Propriety is that perfection of style which comes from a work is authoritatively constructed on approved principles. It arises from prescription, the Greek word, from usage, and from nature. From prescription, in the case of hypothetical edifices open to the sky in honor of Jupiter lightning, the heaven, the sun, or the moon. For these are gods whose semblances and manifestations we behold before our very eyes in the sky when it is cloudless and bright. The temples of Minerva, Mars, and Hercules will be Doric, since the virile strength of these gods make daintiness entirely appropriate to their houses. In temples to Venus, Flora, Proserpine, spring water, and the nymphs, the Corinthian order will be found to have peculiar significance, because these are delicate divinities and so rather slender outlines. Its flowers, leaves, and ornamental volutes will lend propriety where it is due. The construction of temples of the Ionic order, to Juno, Diana, Father Bacchus, and other gods of that kind, will be in keeping with the middle position which they hold, for the building of such will be an appropriate combination of the severity of the Doric and the delicacy of the Corinthian. In describing the societies of Ionian artificers, Joseph da Costa declares the Dionysic rite to have been founded upon the science of astronomy, which by the initiates of this order was correlated to the builder's art. In various documents dealing with the origin of architecture are found hints to the effect that the great buildings erected by these initiated craftsmen were based upon geometrical patterns derived from the constellations. Thus, a temple might be planned according to the constellation of Pegasus, or a court of judgment modeled after the constellation of the Scales. The Dionysians evolved a peculiar code by which they were able to communicate with one another in the dark, and both the symbols and the terminology of their guild were derived, in the main, from the elements of architecture. While stigmatized as pagans by reason of their philosophic principles, it is noteworthy that these Dionysiac craftsmen were almost universally employed in the erection of early Christian abbeys and cathedrals, whose stones, even to this very day, bear distinguishing marks and symbols cut into their surfaces by these illustrious builders. Among the ornate carvings upon the fronts of the great churches of the Old World are frequently found representations of compasses, squares, rules, mallets, and clusters of builders' tools, skillfully incorporated into mural decorations and even placed in the hands of the effigies of saints and prophets standing in exalted niches. A great mystery was contained in the ancient portals of the Cathedral of Notre Dame, which were destroyed during the French Revolution, for among their carvings were numerous Rosicrucian and Masonic emblems, and according to the records preserved by alchemists who studied their bas-relief, the secret processes for metallic transmutation were set forth in their grotesque yet most significant figures. The checkerboard floor upon which the modern Freemasonic lodge stands is the old tracing board of the Dionysiac architects, and while the modern organization is no longer limited to workmen's guilds, it still preserves in its symbols the metaphysical doctrines of the ancient society of which it is presumably the outgrowth. The investigator of the origin of Freemasonic symbolism, who desires to trace the development of the order through the ages, will find a practical suggestion in the following statement of Charles W. Heckethorn. But, considering that Freemasonry is a tree, the roots of which spread through so many soils, it follows the traces thereof must be found in its fruit. That its language and ritual should retain much of the various sects and institutions it has passed through before arriving at their present state. And in Masonry we meet with Indian, Egyptian, Jewish, and Christian ideas. Terms therefrom the supreme ambition of their craft and symbols. See the secret societies of all ages and countries. The Roman collegia of skilled architects were apparently a subdivision of the greater Ionian body, their principles and organization being practically identical with the older Ionian institution. It has been suspected that the Dionysians also profoundly influenced the early Islamic culture, for part of their symbolism found its way into the mysteries of the dervishes. At one time, the Dionysians referred to themselves as the sons of Solomon, and one of the most important of their symbols was the seal of Solomon, two interlaced triangles. This motif is frequently seen in conspicuous parts of Mohammedan mosque. The Knights Templar, who were suspected of anything and everything, are believed to have contacted these Dionysiac artificers to have introduced many of their symbols and doctrines into medieval Europe. But Freemasonry, most of all, owes to the Dionysiac cult the great mass of its symbols and rituals which are related to the science of architecture. From these ancient and illustrious artisans, it has also received the legacy of the unfinished Temple of Civilization, that vast, invisible structure upon which these initiated builders have labored continuously since the inception of their fraternity. This mighty edifice, which has fallen and been rebuilt time after time, but whose foundations remain unmoved, is the true everlasting house of which the temple on the brow of Mount Moriah was but an impermanent symbol. Aside from the operative aspect of their order, the Dionysiac architects had a speculative philosophic code. Human society they considered as a rough and untrued ashlar, but lately chiseled from the quarry of elemental nature. This crude block was the true object upon which these skilled craftsmen labored, polishing it, squaring it, and with the aid of fine carvings, transforming it into a miracle of beauty. While mystics released their souls from the bondage of matter by meditation, and philosophers found their keenest joy in the profundities of thought, these master workmen achieved liberation from the wheel of life and death by learning to swing their hammers with the same rhythm that moves the swirling forces of cosmos. They venerated the deity under the guise of a great architect and master craftsman who was ever gouging rough ashlars from the field of space and truing them into universes. The Dionysians affirmed constructiveness to be the supreme expression of the soul, and, attuning themselves with the ever-visible, constructive, natural processes going on around them, believed immortality could be achieved by thus becoming a part of the creative agencies of nature. There were a couple points that we could stop and talk about, but we've talked about before. The six-pointed star is actually a representation of the number 8, 1, and 3. If you don't know what I'm talking about, we've talked about it in other videos, but I don't have it drawn out. I'm not going to take the time to do that today. Go back and find it. I don't even know which one it was in. There will be another video coming to deal specifically with the seal of Solomon. And the black and white checker pattern, I have a completely different interpretation of that from the building field. Like, that could be, right? You could have little 1-inch squares and it'd be separated by black and white alternating. That is possible. I hold a different interpretation of that, right? Tying right into that 6-pointed star representing the 8, right? You have the 6 points, you have the 1 in the middle and the 1 around it. That, to me, is the representation of the trifold nature of the 7 or 8 chakras, which you have access to. 7 internal, 1 external makes 8. You have 3 lower, you have 3 upper, and 1 heart. That is the 3 triangles and the 2 triangles, the 3 points, and the 3 points with the point in the middle. And then the 1 outside is the divine aura. The divine aura is a perfect blending of black and white, not gray, but black and white. It resembles quite effectively the checkerboard pattern. So while they use the symbols, I am not entirely sure that they have a full understanding of them, including the spiritual nature. Now, that may be part of the mysteries that are not revealed, and they hold that part back, but if so, okay. Right? That is how I see those particular things. Now, this one I'm probably going to step on some toes with as well. Solomon, the personification of universal wisdom. I disagree with that heartily. And again, if you do not understand that, you should definitely go back and check out some of the Bible study. We dealt with Solomon and how he was definitely not. The name Solomon may be divided into 3 syllables. Sol, On, symbolizing light, glory, and truth, collectively and respectively. The Temple of Solomon is, therefore, first of all, the house of everlasting light, its earthly symbol being the temple of stone on the brow of Mount Moriah. According to the mystery teachings, there are 3 temples of Solomon, as there are 3 grand masters, 3 witnesses, and 3 tabernacles of the Transfiguration. 3 is an important number. The first temple is the grand house of the universe, in the midst of which sits the sun, Sol, upon his golden throne. The 12 signs of the zodiacs as fellow craftsmen gather around their shining lord. 3 lights, the stellar, the solar, and the lunar, illuminate the cosmic temple. Accompanied by his retinue of planets, moons, and asteroids, this divine king, Sol Amon, whose glory no earthly monarch shall ever equal, passes in stately pomp down the avenues of space. Whereas Chiron represents the active physical light of the sun, Solomon signifies its invisible but all-powerful, spiritual, and intellectual effulgency. The second symbolic temple is the human body, the little house made in the image of the great universal house. Know ye not, as the Apostle Paul, that ye are the temple of God, and the Spirit of God dwelleth in you. Freemasonry within a temple of stone cannot be other than speculative, but Freemasonry within the living temple of the body is operative. The third symbolic temple is the solar house, an invisible structure, the comprehension of which is a supreme Freemasonic arcanum. The mystery of this intangible edifice is concealed under the allegory of the Soma Sukhion, or wedding garment, described by St. Paul, the robes of glory of the high priest of Israel, the yellow robe of the Buddhist monk, and the robe of blue and gold to which Albert Pike refers in his symbolism. Really? The soul, constructed from an invisible, fiery substance, a flaming golden metal, is cast by the master workman, Chiron Abiv, into the mold of clay, the physical body, and is called the molten sea. The temple of the human soul is built by 3 master masons, personifying wisdom, love, and service. And when constructed according to the law of life, the Spirit of God dwells in the holy place thereof. The solar temple is the true everlasting house, and he who can raise or cast it is a master mason indeed. The best informed Masonic writers have realized that Solomon's temple is a representation, in miniature, of the universal temple. Concerning this point, A.E. White, in A New Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, writes, "It is a macrocosmic in character, so that the temple is a symbol of the universe, a type of manifestation itself." We're going to talk extensively about that at the end. The mystery of the microcosm, redrawn from Cicero's edition of Vitruvius, and this is the man in, right? This is not quite correct. Here we go. Let's correct some things real quick. This circle is too big. It should extend only to the end of the palm, right? If you stick your hand out like this, y'all can see that, right? Yeah. If you stick it out, this is where the circle begins, not here. It's a small, trivial thing, but it is a thing. And this is incorrect in that the square, thereby, has to be wrong as well. The square should actually touch the top of the head. And so, again, not correct. I know I'm pissing people off today. Herein is depicted the mysterious word of Plato, which was crucified in space before the foundation of the world. The anonymous author of the Canon writes, "The Logos, or soul of the world, according to Plato, the Greek Hermes, and the Christ, according to the Christian Gnostics, are all one and the same as the Hebrew Adam Kadmon, who is the second person of the Kabbalistic triad. The Selenian Hermes, described by Hippolytus, so exactly resembles the lesser man found in Cicero's edition of Vitruvius, that they may be justifiably considered to be identical." After relating the figure to Dionysus because of the vine leaves wound in the hair, the same writer concludes, "Here we have clearly and distinctly a curious survival of the cosmic deity of Greece, copied and disfigured by the crude draughtsmen of the Middle Ages, but faithfully preserved and recognizable to the last. Similar figures are to be found in Agrippa's De Occulta Philosophia. Like Cicero's diagrams, however, the key given for their interpretation is most inadequate. Agrippa declares that, being a type of the lesser world, man contains in himself all numbers, measures, weights, motions, and elements. The secret doctrine of Freemasonry, like that of the Dionysiac architects, is concerned primarily with the effort to measure or estimate philosophically the parts and proportions of the microcosm, so that by the knowledge derived therefrom, the supreme ambition of their craft might be realized, the creation of a perfect man. Solomon, the spirit of universal illumination, mental, spiritual, moral, and physical, is personified in the king of an earthly nation. While a great ruler by that name may have built a temple, he who considers the story solely from its historical angle will never clear away the rubbish that covers the secret vaults. The rubbish is an interpolated matter in the form of superficial symbols, allegories, and degrees, which have no legitimate part in the original Freemasonic mysteries. Concerning the loss of the true esoteric key to Masonic secrets, Albert Pike writes, "No one journeys now from the high place of Cabaon to the threshing floor of Oman the Jebusite, nor has seen his master clothed in blue and gold, nor are apprentices and fellowcrafts any longer paid at their respective columns, nor is the master's working tool the tracing board, nor does he use in his work chalk, charcoal, and an earthen vessel, nor does the apprentice, becoming a fellowcraft, pass from the square to the compass, for the meanings of these phrases as symbols have long been lost." Y'all should hit me up. According to the rabbins, like for real. Okay, so the high place of come on to the threshing floor, whatever. His master, clothed in blue and gold, is part of the visionary process. I don't know about this being paid at the respective columns, but the tracing board, that is again the divine, uh, charcoal in an earthen vessel, right? That is the black, the white, and your meat suit. Nor does the apprentice becoming a fellow craft pass from the square to the compass, from the square to the round. For the meanings of these phrases as symbols have long been lost. That is the squaring of the circle, which was tried to be represented in that form that we just looked at, and they got the proportions wrong. I know. I have a different understanding. I have had a different understanding. And so these to me are like the parts that I know what I'm talking about there. I don't know what he's talking about paid at the respective columns. Like that can be terminology based, and so it's lost. But the master clothed in blue and gold, that I know. And the tracing board, I know that. I know what that is. Even if you don't, I do. Nor does he use in his work the charcoal in the earthen vessel. That is representing the Trinity, right? The meat suit, the soul, and the becoming, the white, the black, and the earthen, the balance thereof. All of that is part of it. That if they lost it, too bad, but I got it, so I'm good. According to the ancient rabbins, Solomon was an initiate of the mystery schools, and the temple which he built was actually a house of initiation, containing a mass of pagan philosophic and phallic emblems, which, by the way, is part of the reason why I say that, right, when we went through the Bible study, we took it as literal history, right? We took it as, if this is written as it is, does it stand on its own? And it didn't. There were several, too many to count, discrepancies and inaccuracies and errors in the actual text to take it as historically accurate. But as an allegory, it can work, right? As an allegory, it's perfectly fine. And this right here is part of the reason why I dismissed it as the history, because Solomon did not keep the laws at all in any way, shape, or form. He was in no way a moral authority. Like, be very clear on that. If you go back and you read through what he actually did, take out the 3 books that he is attributed with, which we will touch, well, we can go ahead and touch on it now, right? He has 3 books which he is attributed with. You have the book of Proverbs, you have Ecclesiastes, and you have the Song of Solomon, which, by the way, represent the body, the soul, and the divinity, right? I'm going to leave that for you to see if you can figure out which one represents which. Go back and read them for yourself and see if you understand what I'm talking about. So, as an allegory, no problems. As an actual person with which you want to replicate, Solomon was not it. Not it at all. He did not in any way keep to the commandments, nor did David, in any way, shape, or form. It is quite evident by a literal reading through the books. Kings and Chronicles will let you know what you need to know in those particular parts. Go back and watch the Bible study. I have done it for you. This, being in the temple, is directly contradictory to God. The pomegranates, the palm-headed columns, the pillars before the door, the Babylonian cherubim, and the arrangement of the chambers and draperies all indicate the temple to have been patterned after the sanctuaries of Egypt and Atlantis. Isaac Meyer, in the Kabbalah, makes the following observation. The Pseudo-Clement of Rome writes, God made man, male and female. The male is Christ, the female the church. Self-insertion. The Kabbalists call the Holy Spirit the mother and the church of Israel. The Kabbalists call the Holy Spirit the mother and the church of Israel the daughter. Solomon engraved on the walls of his temple likenesses of the male and female principles to adumbrate this mystery. Such, it is said, were the figures of the cherubim. This was, however, not in obedience to the words of the Torah. They were symbolical of the upper, the spiritual, the former or maker, positive or male, and the lower, the passive, the negative or female, formed or made by the first. We talk about this all of the time, right? There are 2 columns. Boaz and Yakim is how they like to refer to them. One is black, one is white. One goes up, one comes down. There is 2 elemental forces. One is a grounding force. It is the receptive female, here, black, and one creative, destructive, penetrative force, white. The black is at the bottom, the white is at the top. The divine aura is composed of the two correctly pass through the three upper and the three lower into the heart and out into the world in a perfect formation of black and white squares. And so that right there perfectly aligns with what I say. Masonry came to North Africa and Asia Minor from the lost continent of Atlantis. This again, if you don't understand where I stand on that, I have a whole video on it. We talk about it in Timaeus and Crataeus. It is linked above. Not under its present name, but rather under the general designation sun and fire worship. The ancient mysteries did not cease to exist when Christianity became the world's most powerful religion, or when it became not. Great Pan did not die. Freemasonry is the proof of his survival. The pre-Christian mysteries simply assume the symbolism of the new faith, perpetuating through its emblems and allegories the same truths which had been the property of the wise since the beginning of the world. There is no true explanation, therefore, for Christian symbols save that which is concealed within pagan philosophy. Without the mysterious keys carried by the hierophants of the Egyptian, Brahmin, and Persian cults, the gates of wisdom cannot be opened. Consider with reverent spirit, therefore, the sublime allegory of the temple and its builders, realizing that beneath its literal interpretation lies hidden a royal secret. According to the Talmudic legends, Solomon understood the mysteries of the Kabbalah. He was also an alchemist and a necromancer, which again would put him completely at odds with God. Being able to control the demons, and from them and other inhabitants of the invisible worlds, he secured much of his wisdom. In his translation of Clavicula Salomonis, or the Key of Solomon the King, a work presumably setting forth the magical secrets gathered by Solomon and used by him in the conjuration of spirits, and which, according to Frank C. Higgins, contains many sidelights on Masonic initiatory rituals. S.L. McGregor Mathers recognizes the probability that King Solomon was a magician in the fullest sense of that word. Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. I see no reason to doubt, he affirms, the tradition which assigns the authorship of the key to King Solomon. For, among others, Josephus, the Jewish historian, especially mentions the magical works attributed to that monarch. This is confirmed by many Eastern traditions, and his magical skill is frequently mentioned in the Arabian Nights. Concerning Solomon's supernatural powers, Josephus writes in his 8th book of the Antiquities of the Jews. Now, the sagacity and wisdom which God had bestowed upon Solomon was so great that he exceeded the ancients, in so much that he was in no way inferior to the Egyptians, who were said to have been beyond all men in understanding. God also enabled him to learn that skill which expelled demons, which is a science useful and sanative to him. He composed such incantations also by which distempers are alleviated, and he left behind him the manner of using exorcisms, by which they drive away demons, so that they never return, and this method of cure is of great force unto this day. The medieval alchemists were convinced that King Solomon understood the secret processes of Hermes, by means of which it was possible to multiply metals. Dr. Backstrom writes that the universal spirit, Chiron, assisted King Solomon to build his temple, because Solomon, being wise in the wisdom of alchemy, knew how to control this incorporeal essence, and, setting it to work for him, caused the invisible universe to supply him with vast amounts of gold and silver, which most people believed were mined by natural methods. No, it tells you quite clearly in the Bible exactly where Solomon got his money from. It was from a source explicitly denied to him. He went to Egypt and bought horses and chariots and sold them as weapons of war to the other nations, and that is how he amassed his fortune. It tells you quite explicitly in Chronicles, I believe, it might be Kings. It tells you quite explicitly in there that he made his money from dealing in arms. And not only that, but he was specifically denied, right? It was written down that the kings of Israel will not go to Egypt specifically and buy horses or chariots. And yet, that is exactly how they tell you that Solomon made his money. They tell you that flat out. And if you don't understand that, I don't know what to tell you. You should go back and see how bad David was. The mysteries of the Islamic faith are now in the keeping of the dervishes, men who, renouncing worldliness, have withstood the test of 1,001 days of temptation. Jalal-ud-Din, the great Persian Sufic poet and philosopher, is accredited with having founded the Order of Mevlevi, or the Dancing Dervishes, whose movements exoterically signify the motions of the celestial bodies and esoterically result in the establishment of a rhythm which stimulates the centers of spiritual consciousness within the dancer's body. I do not know enough about that to expound upon it, but it seems not quite right. According to the mystical canon, there are always on earth a certain number of holy men who are admitted to intimate communication with the deity. The one who occupies the highest position among his contemporaries is called the axis, or pole, of his time. Subordinate to the pole are two holy beings who bear the title of the Faithful Ones, and are assigned places on his right and left, respectively. Below these is a quartet of intermediate ones, Eftad, and on successively lower planes are 5 lights, Anwar, and 7 very good, Akyar. The next rank is filled by 40 absent ones, Rija el-Gahib, also termed martyrs, Shahida. When an axis quits this earthly existence, he is succeeded by the Faithful One, who has occupied the place at his right hand. For to these holy men, who also bear the collective titles of Lord of Souls and Directors, is committed a spiritual supremacy over mankind far exceeding the temporal authority of earthly rulers. See Mysticism and Magic in Turkey by L.M. J. Garnett. The Axis is a mysterious individual who, unknown and unsuspected, mingles with mankind, and who, according to tradition, has his favorite seat upon the roof of the Kaaba. J.P. Brown, in The Dervishes, gives a description of these master souls. The Kaaba is where they house the stone that they worship. Freemasonry's priceless heritage. The sanctum sanctorum of Freemasonry is ornamented with the Gnostic jewels of 1,000 ages. Its rituals ring with the divinely inspired words of seers and sages. 100 religions have brought their gifts of wisdom to its altar. Arts and sciences unnumbered have contributed to its symbolism. Freemasonry is a worldwide university, teaching the liberal arts and sciences of the soul to all who will hearken to its words. But you're missing your keys, bud. Its chairs are seats of learning, and its pillars uphold an arch of universal education. Its trestle boards are inscribed with the eternal verities of all ages, and upon those who comprehend its sacred depths has dawned the realization that within the Freemasonic mysteries lie hidden the long-lost arcana sought by all peoples since the genesis of human reason. The philosophic power of Freemasonry lies in its symbols, its priceless heritage from the mystery schools of antiquity. In her letter to Robert Freaky Gold, Albert Pike writes, "It began to shape itself, to my intellectual vision, into something more imposing and majestic, solemnly mysterious and grand. It seemed to me like the pyramids in their loneliness, in whose yet undiscovered chambers may be hidden, for the enlightenment and coming generations, the sacred books of the Egyptians, so long lost to the world. Like the Sphinx, half buried in the desert, in its symbolism, which and its spirit of brotherhood are its essence, Freemasonry is more ancient than any of the world's living religions. It It has these symbols and doctrines, which, older than himself, Zarathustra inculcated, and 2. Seem to me a sublime spectacle, sublime yet pitiful. The ancient faith of our ancestors holding out to the world its symbols, once so eloquent, and mutely and in vain asking for an interpreter. And so I came at last to see that the true greatness and majesty of Freemasonry consist in its proprietorship of these and its other symbols, and that its symbolism is its soul. Though the temples of Thebes and Karnak be now but majestic heaps of broken and time-battered stone, the spirit of Egyptian philosophy still marches triumphant through the centuries. Though the rock-hewn sanctuaries of the ancient Brahmins be now deserted and their carvings crumbled into dust, still the wisdom of the Vedas endures. Though the oracles be silenced and the house of the mysteries be now but rows of ghostly columns, still shines the spiritual glory of Hellas with luster undiminished. Though Zoroaster, Hermes, Pythagoras, Plato, and Aristotle are now but dim memories in a world once rocked by the transcendency of their intellectual genius, still, in the mystic temple of Freemasonry, these God-men live again in their words and symbols, and the candidate, passing through the initiations, feels himself face to face with these illumined hierophants of days long past. Okay, and that's going to wrap this one up. Next up will be Mystic Christianity, which I am sure I will step on plenty of toes about. I said several things in here that probably got you upset if you hold to the old traditions. I am not here for the old traditions. I am here, in fact, to break several of them apart, and that began with the Bible study. That was not where I intended that to go, right? I intended to just read the book according to how I was told to read the book, to take off those glasses of predetermination, right? That the Jews have to be the chosen people and that there was a sacrifice required for your sin. And so I read it without those particular lenses, and it led me somewheres. It led me to a whole brand new knowledge and understanding that I did not have before. And it is a surer one for me. I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay information, and it has been pointed out to me time and time again. And while it is not intentional, I do not apologize for it. I am here to break things. I am not here to tiptoe around your feelings in them. David was not a good man. Like, objectively, if you look back at the accounts of his life, right, as it is recorded in the book by which we use as the reference point, he was nowhere near being a good, God-fearing, faithful person at all. He did not follow any of the commandments. As a matter of fact, he broke all of them at various points. Solomon was the same way. Solomon did some pretty horrific things. He killed all of his brothers so that he could have the throne. That is a thing. Go back and read the book. He was an arms dealer. He dealt in death and destruction. That is truth. Go back to Ecclesiastes and Song of Solomon and see how many people he slept with and see if that considers itself as adultery. See if any of the things break out to you. The pridefulness and the things that happened in that book are somewhat astounding. If you go back and then you look at that and you're like, wait, this entire foundation is a little bit broken. Well, you can't build on broken foundation. If the sands don't stand still, then you're on shifting sands, and shifting sands will break your building down. The time has come for that particular building to break. And so that's what I am here for. There are several things in here that I have the keys for that apparently the people who think they have the keys don't. It is entirely possible to lose the meaning behind symbology, right? Now, I'm not saying that I have all of the keys. I'm not saying I have the only keys, but I definitely have keys that fit here. These are not keys that I just whisked up, right? These are things that were shown to me in a process by which I have no control. And so the fact that they fit means something to me. It doesn't have to you. I'm not here to convince you. I'm here to tell you things. Hopefully, I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a series of somewhat difficult topics. I understand that I have unconventional beliefs and that I do step on toes, and I don't apologize for it, but I have several playlists where I detail in exhaustive detail exactly why I stand right here. Exactly why the things that I believe are the things that I believe, and that I will not be shaken from them. It is a new thing for me to not have my faith shaken, and so it is a little bit wild. It's a hell of a ride. It is a wonderful journey. I am enjoying it greatly. And it is fun having keys that people don't have. But I'm still trying to give them away. Every time that I see something that we need to talk about, that is what I am doing. I am giving you the keys. Now, I can't give you that word. That I can't do. But pretty much everything else is on the table. I can tell you how to pull the energy up. I have a video on that. I can tell you how to project it out. I've got a video on that. I can tell you about the process of understanding your own mind and how to get control of that. I have several videos on that. There are things that I am here to tell you, and you don't have to believe them. I don't care. I want you to. I would love if everybody would pick it up, but it doesn't matter. I have it. Hopefully, you're picking it up too. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, share, and a sub. Throw me a comment. Let me know if you agree or disagree. If it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. And if you really like what I'm doing, hit me with that super thanks, because I am not a communist. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you were here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt State. Peace.